4 years ago, Charles Soludo walked into Anambra Government House with a PhD in economics, a reputation as the man who once saved Nigeria's banking system, and a promise that he would turn the Southeast's most prosperous state into something that actually looked like it. Now, he's returning for a second term, and here's the tension nobody is really sitting with. Anambra generates billions in internally generated revenue, sits at the heart of Nigeria's commercial corridor, and yet infrastructure gaps, insecurity, and youth unemployment remain stubborn realities. So the question isn't whether Soludo is smart enough. The question is, why, after 4 years of a globally credentialed economist in power, are Anambra people still waiting for the transformation he promised? And more importantly, what does his second time actually change? Stay with me, because the answer reveals something much bigger than Anambra. Before we go deeper, if you're just finding Niger News feed, welcome. This channel exists to break down what's really happening in Nigerian politics without the noise, without the spin. Hit subscribe and stay with me, because this one gets interesting. Let's establish the foundation quickly. Charles Chukwuma Soludo was inaugurated for his second term as Anambra State Governor in March 2026, having won re-election comfortably under the All Progressives Grand Alliance, APGA, the party that has held Anambra since 2006. His victory wasn't a surprise. His first term, while imperfect, gave him enough political capital to return with a mandate. But here's why this moment matters right now. Second terms in Nigerian politics are historically where governors either define their legacy or expose their limits. First terms are about settling in, managing expectations, surviving the political ecosystem. Second terms, with no election to worry about, are where the real decisions get made. The governor is either unleashed or unaccountable. Soludo came in 2022 inheriting a state battered by IPOB sit-at-home compliance, a security crisis that was killing commerce, and an IGR base that wasn't being fully optimized. His first-term pitch was built on what he called the livable and prosperous Anambra vision, a smart city framework, economic modernization, and security stabilization. Now, in 2026, the trigger event is simple. He's back, the people's expectations are higher, and there is no more runway for promises. The clock starts now. To understand what Soludo can and cannot do in his second term, you need to understand the institutional constraints he's operating within. First, APGA and state power. Anambra is an APGA state in an APC federal government. That matters because federal allocations, intervention funds, and infrastructure partnerships all require some level of political alignment or negotiation. Soludo has to manage that relationship carefully. He can't afford to be combative with Abuja the way some opposition governors are, but he also can't be seen as a puppet of the federal center. Second, the fiscal structure. Under Nigeria's constitution, states control their own IGR but remain heavily dependent on the Federation Account Allocation Committee, FAC, for a significant portion of their budget. Anambra's IGR has been growing, but it is still not at the level where the state can fully self-fund its transformation agenda without federal transfers. This limits how aggressive Soludo can be in capital expenditure. Third, local government autonomy. The 2024 Supreme Court ruling affirmed that local governments must receive their allocations directly, not through state governments. This structurally reduces the financial leverage that governors have historically used to fund projects at the grassroots. Soludo now must govern with less discretionary control over LGA funds than his predecessors had. Fourth, security architecture. Internal security in Nigeria is constitutionally a federal matter. The police, the military, the DSS all answer to Abuja. Governors can fund security infrastructure and create state-level outfits, but they cannot command federal security forces. This means that any improvement in Anambra's security situation requires active federal cooperation, not just state-level will. These constraints don't make governance impossible, but they mean that the gap between what a governor promises and what he can deliver is always partially structural, not just a function of personal performance.
Here's where it gets layered. Now, this is the part of the video that most political commentary skips. Let's go deeper. Who benefits from Soludo's second term? The most obvious beneficiary is Soludo himself. A second-term governor with no more elections to contest can now build legacy infrastructure, cement his national reputation, and position himself for whatever comes next. That whatever comes next conversation is already happening quietly. A man with Soludo's CV, former CBN governor, Harvard-trained economist, sitting state governor, is not a man whose ambitions stop at Awka. The second set of beneficiaries is Anambra's business class. The Southeast trading and manufacturing community has long wanted a serious, credible technocrat at the helm, not a politician who governs by sentiment. Soludo speaks their language. The Onitsha Market Corridor, the Nnewi Industrial Cluster, the emerging tech and fintech activity in Awka, these economic nodes want policy stability, security, and infrastructure. A confident second-term Soludo is good for business confidence. Who stands to lose? The informal power networks that have thrived in ambiguity. Anambra, like most Nigerian states, has layers of contractors, political middlemen, and community leaders whose influence depends on the inefficiency of government. A more technocratic, data-driven second-term administration threatens that ecosystem. Expect resistance to come from within, from commissioners, from party structures, from contractors who've grown comfortable. The IPOB question, the silent player. You cannot discuss Anambra's politics without discussing the elephant in the room. The sit-at-home phenomenon, the security disruptions, while significantly reduced from their peak, still represent an unresolved political tension. The federal government's approach to the IPOB question and the continued detention of Nnamdi Kanu remain live variables that Soludo cannot fully control but that directly affect his ability to govern. A sudden escalation in that situation would derail any second-term agenda immediately. The Southeast Governor's alignment. Introduced here, resolved later, watch what the Southeast Governors do collectively over the next 18 months. That coalition, or lack of it, will determine more about Anambra's fate than any single Soludo policy. Soludo is not governing in isolation. The Southeast geopolitical zone is navigating a complex post-2023 election identity, a zone that overwhelmingly backed Peter Obi, that feels structurally excluded from federal power, and that is now having to decide: do you work within the APC federal structure to extract resources, or do you maintain political distance and accept marginalization? Soludo's positioning on that question will define the second term. Electoral implications. Soludo has no personal electoral concern now, but APGA as a party does. The 2027 general elections are on the horizon. How Soludo performs in his second term will directly affect whether APGA can hold Anambra post-Soludo. A strong Soludo second term builds the party. A weak one opens the door for APC or Labour Party. Timeline of key moves. 2022 to 2023, first-term stabilization phase. Security, IGR restructuring, early infrastructure signaling. 2024 to 2025, mid-term consolidation. Some projects delivered, some stalled, security improved but not resolved. 2026 second inauguration. Expectations recalibrated upward. The give him time argument no longer applies. 2026 to 2028, the delivery window. This is when the Soludo legacy is either built or broken. Now, once you understand who the players are and what they want, the national picture starts to look very different. Let's zoom out. What Soludo does in Anambra matters beyond Anambra, and here's why. The Southeast as a policy experiment. Anambra is the most economically active state in the Southeast. If Soludo can demonstrate that a non-APC state can achieve measurable development outcomes without being starved by Abuja, it sends a message to every opposition governor in Nigeria. It strengthens the argument for true fiscal federalism. If he fails, if the story becomes even a CBN governor couldn't fix Anambra, it reinforces the cynicism that has been building across Nigeria about the capacity of any government to deliver. The federal-state balance. The 2024 LGA autonomy ruling changed the fiscal geometry of Nigeria.
This section is relevant, and here is why. The diaspora dimension. Anambra has one of the highest diaspora remittance bases of any Nigerian state. Igbo communities in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and across Europe send money home. And many of them are watching Soludo's governance with genuine interest because they want to return, they want to invest, and they want to know whether the state is actually becoming what he promised. Soludo has made deliberate overtures to the diaspora: investment summits, direct appeals, digitization of land registry and business registration processes. The question for Term 2 is whether those overtures translate into actual capital inflows or remain cosmetic. The UK and US lens. British and American governments monitor Southeast Nigeria through two lenses: the IPOB question, classified as a security concern, and investment climate. Any improvement in security and governance in Anambra sends a positive signal to foreign investors looking at the state as a foothold into Nigeria's southeast market. The World Bank and Development Finance angle. Nigeria has been accessing multilateral credit lines for state-level infrastructure. Anambra's ability to structure bankable projects, something Soludo's economics background should theoretically make easier, determines whether the state can access those funds. Watch for any World Bank or AFDB-linked Anambra project announced in 2026. That's a sign the second term is serious about capital mobilization. Let me push back on myself here and on the dominant narratives. Misconception number 1. Soludo is too academic to be an effective governor. This one shows up in political conversations constantly. The argument is that technocrats make poor politicians. They are too removed from the people, too focused on data and frameworks. But look at the evidence. Soludo's first term showed he could navigate political terrain well enough to win re-election comfortably. The question isn't whether he's too academic, it's whether his administration has the political will beneath him at the commissioner and local government level to execute what he designs from the top. Misconception number 2. APGA is weak, so Soludo can't deliver without APC support. This underestimates what institutional legitimacy can do at the state level. Soludo doesn't need APC membership to access federal infrastructure programs. He needs relationships, negotiation skills, and a state that is seen as administratively credible. Those are things he can control. Misconception number 3. The security situation in Anambra is resolved. This is the optimistic narrative being pushed by some government-aligned voices, and it doesn't hold up. Security has improved. There's a meaningful difference between 2022 and 2026. But improved is not solved. The underlying political conditions that created the instability have not been resolved. The Kanu question is still live. A second term of peace is not guaranteed. The strongest opposing argument. Critics of Soludo will say that his first term overpromised and underdelivered on infrastructure, that the smart city vision remains mostly a vision, that roads are still bad, that hospitals are still underfunded. That argument has merit. The accountability question for Term 2 is, where are the projects? Not the plans, the projects. Here's the scenario most people aren't preparing for, and it's the one that could change everything in the next 24 months. Now, if what I just laid out surprises you, drop a comment below.
The scenario nobody is pricing in. Most likely next moves. Soludo will spend the first 6 months of Term 2 attempting to accelerate flagship infrastructure, roads, the Anambra Airport commercial viability question, and the AUKA master plan. These are the visible legacy markers he needs. On security, expect continued investment in the Anambra Vigilante Service and technology-based surveillance infrastructure, drones, CCTV networks, community intelligence systems. The model is Lagos light policing,
adapted to Anambra's terrain. On IGR, watch for aggressive formalization drives, land registration, tax compliance technology, business registration systems. This is where a second-term Soludo can make structural changes that outlast his tenure. Signals that things are escalating, positively or negatively. Positive: a major foreign or diaspora investment announced publicly with verifiable capital commitment. A measurable drop in unemployment data. Infrastructure completion, not just groundbreaking. Negative: a return of sit-at-home compliance above 50% in major commercial areas. Any major political defection from APGA to APC. Federal government withholding of Anambra's allocations for political reasons. The Southeast Governor's collective posture toward Abuja in the run-up to 2027 will be the single biggest external variable affecting Soludo's second term. If the zone fractures, some governors cutting deals with APC, others maintaining distance, Anambra's federal resource access becomes unpredictable. Best case, Soludo delivers 2 to 3 signature infrastructure projects, IGR crosses a new threshold, security holds, and Anambra becomes a genuine case study for what disciplined state governance looks like in Nigeria. His national profile rises. APGA is strengthened. Worst case, a security relapse driven by unresolved federal-level political tensions disrupts commerce, scares away investment, and leaves the transformation agenda as a document rather than a reality. The narrative becomes, even the best credentialed governor in Nigeria couldn't fix the Southeast. Long-term impact if nothing changes. APGA's hold on Anambra weakens post-Soludo. The state becomes a prize for 2031, contested by APC and Labour Party, and Soludo himself exits as a cautionary tale rather than a model. The question I opened this video with, why, after 4 years of a globally credentialed economist, are Anambra people still waiting, is about to be answered. So let's come back to where we started. The question wasn't whether Soludo is capable. The question was, what does his second term actually change? Here's the measured answer: everything and nothing, depending on one variable. The credential was never the problem. The CBN pedigree was never the gap. The missing piece in term 1 and potentially in term 2 is execution depth, the quality of the people beneath Soludo, the systems that survive beyond his office, and the willingness to make politically costly decisions in the interest of long-term outcomes. A second term gives him the political freedom to make those costly decisions. No more elections, no more campaigns, just governance. The real test of Chukwuma Soludo is not whether he can design a smart city vision. It's whether he can build the political and administrative machinery to deliver it floor by floor, block by block, in a Nigerian context with all the constraints that come with that. Anambra is watching, Nigeria is watching, and honestly, so is the diaspora. What's your read? Drop it in the comments. I want to know whether you think Soludo's second term will be defined by delivery or by potential that never quite landed. If this breakdown gave you clarity on what's really going on, do me a favor, share it with one person who needs to understand this. Like the video, subscribe to Niger Newsfeed, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.